Welcome to Faith Hour, a service offered by Faith Church International, a Seventh-day Adventist church in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota, with Pastor Brian Mungandi as pastor. Faith Church International is committed to the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ to make the gospel meaningful and relevant to your daily experience as you work, love, and live. The gospel of Jesus Christ is about God's love, giving us a second chance, and hope in life. We urge you to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. Allow Him to be Lord, and you will find new meaning in life. Faith Hour hopes that today's program will help make your days a little bright. God bless you all.
I don't know about your house, but at my house, I know that there are some people that constantly are one step behind. Now, I won't name names, but I know at my house, it just seems like there is someone who has a habit of just putting off until the last minute. Now, I'm talking about putting off stuff that needs to be done. Stuff that they are supposed to be doing, and they put it off until the last minute. If you have a house like my house, and you have kids like my kids, you know exactly what I'm talking about. At my house, I have a house of boys, 4 boys, including daddy. It seems there is this constant, I constantly hear, hang on, I forgot, hold up, I got it. My experience at my house seems like 9 out of 10 times when we are headed out of the house to go somewhere, you can bet your money someone will not be completely ready. You are in the car, someone will still be in the house. And then you hear someone in the car shouting, saying, can you grab my earphones? Or can you bring my charger when you come? There is this. So my friends, I was struck when I began to study this passage. And I read verse 4. I was struck by what the Lord was saying in this verse. In fact, he makes a statement that acknowledges a universal human consciousness. The King James Bible translates verse 4 by saying, the Lord said, I must work the work of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. That's a powerful thought right there. You see, if I say these words using the street language of our today, I would say there are 12 hours in a day. Then comes darkness. And when that blackness comes, it covers all the activities. But if I want to be a little more philosophical, I will use the words used by old Egyptians who exhibited a skeleton for their guests, and then they will say, let's eat and drink, tomorrow we die. They wanted to emphasize the shortness of life. Can I suggest to you, church, that this thought of the shortness of life can impact anyone to be diligent? But I must be quick to also say that, you see, being diligent, and that's a good characteristic. Being diligent can cause people to work fervently and furiously, but it will not encourage moral principles in human nature. There are people who are very diligent in their secular world, and yet the same people don't have goodwill feelings. They don't exhibit spirit. They are spiritless towards other people. Such people are almost useless when it comes to the cause of God, because they lack positiveness that would make them a powerful force in the cause of God. My friends, to be useful in the cause of God, we need daily consecration. We need to daily lay our lives at the cross. We need to daily surrender our plans and our purpose before God. Now, if you look at what the Lord is saying here and you begin to study it in depth, you will discover that he is really taking up a common humanist point of view. He is saying, I must work while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. That bothered me a little bit. Because I wanted to know exactly what the Lord precisely wanted us to understand when he uses the metaphor of day and night. I struggled with this, especially knowing that most of us here understand very little about darkness. You see, in our days, we don't spend much time in real darkness. If we go out at night, we use a flashlight. And the street walks have street lights. Our cars have headlights. Now, our houses are very comfortable. We have light bulbs. Even the beds we have side lamps. And so we really don't understand darkness. But not so during the Lord's days. During the Lord's time, everything came to a standstill. When night came, you are under compulsory. You can't do any other activity. So when I was reading this verse, I was forced to ask myself, why does the Lord feel that there is work that needs to be done, which should be crowded in a definite space of time? Why does the Lord feel that a time is coming, and when that time comes, there is no opportunity to do work? I want to suggest that for us to understand the full impact of this text, we need to look at the whole context. We need to look at John and see how these words fit into John's gospel scheme. In studying the book of John, I discovered that the main purpose for the book of John is to bring the readers, you and me, to faith. John uses every miracle in the book for the express purpose of bringing people to believe that Jesus is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. He turned water into wine so that people would believe. He healed the nobleman's son so that people would have faith. He walked on the water so that they could believe. He fed 5,000 people so that they could. In chapter 8, verse 59, Jesus, the light of the world, the great I am, is threatened. The Jews pick up stones to stone him, and he had to escape for his life. Now when we come to chapter 9, it picks up from that scenario that threatened the life of Jesus Christ. And we see Jesus even under danger. He halts his steps to do an act of good. When he sees this blind man, his disciples look at him and they see a theological issue. So they ask a theological question. And if you look at their question, it reflects a narrow understanding of God's justice. You see, the disciples assume that people suffer because they have sinned. They assume that those that suffer deserve it because they have sinned. Now, this is a fascinating story. This is a fascinating story. And so the disciple, in their thinking, they are saying to themselves, as they look at this man born blind, they think it had to be something he did in the womb. Or it must be something that the parents did. That's complicated. And so, I want to suggest to you that, you see, Jesus does not deny the sin cause. Jesus acknowledges that suffering came into the world because of sin. But the point he's making in this particular event, he is saying specific sins in the past does not correlate to specific suffering in the present. That's powerful. What Jesus is saying here is saying, don't get it in your head the idea that God will go around cursing people so that he would come back later and heal them so that he gets the glory. No. The Lord doesn't work like that. You see, the Lord will take what has happened in the past and turn that suffering into greater good now. By this miracle, Jesus is saying to us, he's looking at this present suffering, the blindness of the person that may have lasted several years since he was born blind. And he is saying, I will take this suffering and every suffering that you and I experience in the present and turn it and create a source of greater blessing and give you the apparatus for your personal witness. Joseph knew this truth, because after his brothers sold him and they began starving because of famine, when they came, he says to them, he says, you see, you intended this for ill, but God intended it for good. That's powerful. That's how God operates. I want to suggest that this story puts our lives in perspective. Jesus allows us to see this story so that we can see God's working. I've come to the conclusion, my friends, I've come to the conclusion by looking at this story that every one of us here has a one and unique story in your life, how God is working in your life. I want to suggest that therefore we must be very careful when we are dealing with each other, because we shouldn't stand in judgment, because I can assure you at that present moment you don't know the complete story of the one that you want to judge. You don't know how God is working in his life. If you look at verse 4, I want to suggest here that the Lord, in his thoughts, he sees the present, this man who is born blind, and he sees the future, Faith Church International. And by giving sight to this blind man, he wants Faith Church to see what he thinks and what he thought should be the works of God in the world. Jesus associates us with him in the task that was committed to him by God. Now, when you study this verse, most Greek manuscripts translate it this way: we must work the work of him who sent me, as long as it's day. Night is coming when no one can work. Jesus is teaching us in this miracle that we should set ourselves up to work to abolish darkness. He's saying we must work the work of him who sent me as long as it's day, because Jesus wants us, we, to work to fight against sin and sorrow. He wants us to do everything in our power so that we can fight against the abundant growth of evil. Jesus is calling upon each one of us, you and I, so that we can begin to give people sight, so that they can see the light of the world, so that they can see Jesus Christ. So he says, we must work the work of him who sent me as long as it's day. So because night is coming when no one can work. When I read the gospel, I hear the gospel saying, Jesus is our example in all things. I see the gospels showing us the suffering, the sick, the lame, the invalid coming to Jesus, and they get relieved of their suffering. As I read the gospel, I see that Jesus was acquainted with every heart, so much that he was able to minister to every need. You know, when you read the Gospels, you hear Jesus speak words, loving words, to comfort, to encourage, to bless. He took time to explain to those that were listening to him the principles of the kingdom. He did not seek after fame. He did not seek after riches. He did not shrink from responsibility. Jesus was conscious of the limits on his life. And so Jesus did not put off stuff until the last minute. He did the stuff that needed to be done, and he says here, I will work the work of him who has sent me while it is still day. So when you read this passage, a small passage and yet profound, you see that Jesus is calling for his followers right then and right now, right here. He wants us to work the work of him who has sent us. Jesus is saying to you and me, we must feel and sense the urgency of our mission. We must realize the importance of the work that we have been called for as a church. We must function with the same principles. We must conduct ourselves with the same ethics. We must operate under the same operational priorities that let Jesus function at his time. Church, this year, as your pastor, I want to ask of every program we do in this church, I want to ask of every event, I want to ask of every song, I want to ask, when we do this program, when we do this event, when we sing this song, are we contributing to giving life? I want to see us as a church share life. I mean, share the life power of God to those that we interact with. I want to see this church in our ministry, in our encounter with the community, that we are part and parcel of giving hope to those that are despairing in our community. This church, oh, I pray that we must apply the kind of zeal that says we are thinking of the urgency of our mission. We must feel the pressure of human needs. We as a church need to realize that the human need is urgent. We are seeing the close of probation. The gospel demands an action without delay. We must share the good news now. Because salvation is now. We must live in continuous anticipation for the return of the Lord, because he may return now. We must share the gospel because it's the power unto salvation, because it demonstrates the grace of God, because it brings peace and everlasting life. Time is short, brethren. We must work while it's still day. I want to suggest to you that in the spiritual world, it's real dark. Really dark. I have learned by studying this story that blindness really is not the quantity of the quality of our vision, or even the condition of our eyes. When I study this story, in the spiritual world, it's not about the darkness around us. It's the darkness within us. You see, church, this story is saying how we see others. I mean, the way we see life in reality is an extension of ourselves. I want to say it straight here. Until our eyes are opened by Jesus Christ, what we see in others is really just a projection of ourselves. Church, can I say that without Christ in our lives, our world is empty of spiritual values? I personally believe that Jesus is the sum total of everything that our heart desires. As I close this service, I'm asking you, everyone here, every member here in this congregation, let's begin to think how we can do God's work. We must begin to think how we can share the gospel, how we can contribute to peace and harmony in our community. Let's make plans to alleviate suffering in our community. Let's come together and strategize on how this church can work together so that we can put God's grace on display in our community. I hear Jesus saying we must bear each other's burdens. Steve Green, in his song, People Need the Lord, who said it right. He said, and I'm going to paraphrase here, and I will use the plural. Steve Green says, every day they pass us by, and we see them. We see it in their eyes. They are empty people, filled with cares, headed nobody knows where. They go through with their private pain. They live fear to fear. Their laughter hides their silent cries. Church, can you hear them? People need the Lord. At the end of their broken dreams, the Lord is the open door. When will we realize as a church that people need the Lord? We are called to take the light.
Faith Hour is a TV program produced by Faith Church International in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. We hope you have been blessed by today's broadcast. Please note that Faith Hour also offers a free online Bible study course to help you become acquainted with the Bible as you deal with issues and challenges of your everyday life. We would like to invite you to join our live worship service. We gather every Saturday, the Lord's Sabbath day, at 9:30 a.m. for music and Bible study. And then at 11 a.m., we have a preaching service with messages that are relevant to real needs in people's daily lives. If you are looking for a power-filled worship service where you can encounter the love of God, we invite you to join us in worship and experience God's amazing love. Call us at the phone numbers on the screen or visit our website for more information. God bless you and yours.